More specifically, he's talking about the quest for fatherhood, right? Related to Invisible Man. The quest for fatherhood, regardless of gender, is a quest for one's own authority. Okay. And so we see a parade of fathers as it relates to the Invisible Man, right? One of the first fathers is actually his grandfather, who gives him some advice that he really doesn't understand, probably because he's not listening. He is, in the text, beset by a love for light. But of course, remember, the only time that he is beset by a love for sound, meaning listening, is when he's high. He hits the marijuana that a few jokers gave him. He's eating slow gin and ice cream. He's listening to Louis Armstrong, What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue? He says it's one thing to see around corners, it's another to hear around corners. The grandfather's advice is extremely important because it is trickster advice. It is advice that tells him, don't just change the joke to slip the yoke, right? He's saying, agree them to destruction and death, fill them with you until their guts bust. He is a spy and a traitor, right? But he is also kind of a revolutionary because he's saying, don't face these people up and down, trick them. And never forget about yourself, because the idea of being the trickster is you are seeking advantage, right, for yourself and not just obedience to whatever this parental or father figure is. Because he doesn't listen to this advice. This stone cold grandfather, right, formerly enslaved, actually in chains advice. He is looking for information about fatherhood, i.e., authority, outside of himself the entire novel. The first false father that he engages with is Norton, who we know is not an actual father because he sees him as a symbol. He sees him as his destiny. And the Invisible Man says to himself, what is this guy talking about? He doesn't even know my name, which is the perfect right way to be clear. This is clearly not a father. This is not who you should pattern your, right, your authority on, right? Because your authority would just be obedience, and then who would you be? If you just said Yazabas to Norton all the time, where would he be? He might think on the one hand that his ambition will carry him, and therefore if he just agrees, he's not agreeing them to death, as the grandfather says, he's agreeing them into giving him things. That's what he's imbued by that notion of what authority and fatherhood is. As we go through the entire novel, we meet other false fathers. And so when we're talking about this idea of a fatherhood script, we're talking about the authority of the individual to be themselves. Does that make sense? Okay. Oh, yes. Who's the real father? That may be another way to read the whole novel. Who's the real daddy here in terms of his authority in himself for himself? Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So let's do a little bit of this, and I'm going to let you guys go probably a little early today. Thursdays are like that. Okay. So as we look at the readings for this week, you're going to, of course, be acquainted with the Golden Day. When we look at Ellison in particular, as we move towards the scene relative to the Golden Day,